Who do you think the judge is going to believe?
Lisa M., public defender.
The kid who's charged with possession or the police officer?
These defendants accept
Josh W., Boston's top prosecutor.
not one shred of responsibility.
Are they being made not to cooperate in this?
Billy D., detective.
Or is it something that they really want?
If somebody's hired to kill somebody, they just do it.
Jeffrey F., victim.
The last thing they do is tell you they're going to do it.
Down to the session to get my verdict.
Vic T., assistant district attorney.
By not guilty. Big fat not guilty.
Inside the underbelly of the American justice system, a new documentary series, Boston Law, starts January 16th on BBC One.
Every year, about 50 people are killed by lethal fumes due to faulty home heating appliances. You can't see it, smell it, or taste it, but carbon monoxide can kill. Get your heating system checked every year. It could save your life.
Dream Team presents Sunday nights, Monday mornings, 1 till 4, 97 to 99 FM, BBC Radio 1.
It was a marriage that made millions.
The only thing we didn't do together was sex.
But when the visionary ad man and the mighty Benetton took on America, they hadn't bargained for a couple in Kentucky.
Toscani is a sick person. There are some people who don't want to see the world from another point of view.
For a company to make even $1 on the blood of an innocent victim, no way.
How Benetton was humbled by the power of the people. Blood on the Carpet returns Tuesday at 9:50 on BBC Two.
Apparently yet another female's after my boyfriend.
Sunday nights are Glen Bogle nights.
You are forcing them out. It's not about other people.
New Monarch of the Glen, Sunday 8:10, BBC One.
This is BBC One, now joining BBC News 24 and the weather with Alex Deakin.
Well, Western Scotland has seen its fair share of rain over the last couple of days. On Wednesday, Lucerne on the Isle of Skye was the wettest. Thursday, it was Tiree, 20 millimetres of rain falling in 24 hours, getting on for an inch of rain there. It wasn't all doom and gloom, it was quite mild, particularly in the southern half of the UK. Guernsey was the top temperature, 12 Celsius, 54 in terms of Fahrenheit, and across in Cornwall, Falmouth saw, well, getting on for 7 hours of sunshine. I don't think they're going to see 7 hours of sunshine on Friday. Low pressures in charge. This one moving away into the North Sea, but this one here and this one are set to join forces during the course of the night tonight and into Friday, gradually pushing across the country during the day and then edging up into the North Sea to leave us with a northwesterly flow and a mixture of sunshine and showers as we go towards the weekend. But for tonight and Friday, that rain will be heavy across the southern half of Britain. And really, with the water levels already high, we are looking at the increased risk of further flooding. The low pressure and the rain set to be in this sort of position come around dawn across the bulk of England and Wales. Further north, though, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some clearing skies here, allowing some mist and fog patches to form, and also allowing the temperatures to take a bit of a tumble. As low as -1 Celsius we could see in the glens of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, allowing some icy stretches to form on the roads. Further south, though, a milder night, temperatures, 7 or 8 along the south coast, and with quite a brisk breeze blowing here as well. So we go into Friday morning then. The mist and fog may well linger in parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, but generally I think it'll be a brighter morning here. Some sunshine coming through, just 1 or 2 scattered showers around. But across the bulk of England and Wales, well, it's a gloomy and a wet start to the day. Heavy pulses of rain, the rain turning to sleet and snow over the Pennines and also some of the Welsh mountains. But I think in Wales, during the course of the day, things should start to brighten up. The rain will move away to the east and we'll see some sunshine coming out, but also a scattering of showers and a little bit cooler than we've been used to, 7 Celsius at the very best. Now that rain will be moving east, and I think it'll take its time before it clears away from northeastern parts of England. Really, well, down the northwestern parts we could see some sunshine coming out, but generally it'll be a gloomy day, only a very gradual improvement, and feeling quite chilly here. Temperatures at best 5 Celsius with that strong wind blowing in off the sea. Now really it is down this eastern side, it's going to stay not only northeastern England but southeastern parts of Scotland and also down East Anglia through the afternoon. It's going to remain gloomy and wet. Further west we could see some brightening skies coming through, as I said, for Wales, but also southwestern parts of England, some sunshine coming out. Temperatures in that southwestern corner, well, we could see 9, perhaps 10 again in the Channel Islands, but, well, further north, a little bit chillier, 5s or 6s, and we've seen with that brisk wind feeling even colder than that, but not as cold as it was at this day back in 1985. A very chilly spell, -4 Celsius at best in parts of Kent. But looking forward to the weekend then, and that low pressure system moves away, as we've seen, northwesterly, mixture of sunshine and showers for Saturday. The showers mainly focused in the west, some sleet and snow showers continuing down east, the best of any sunshine there in the south, but getting a little bit chillier, and for Sunday that trend continues. More sleet and snow showers, particularly over Scotland, some heavy downpours here, but further east a little bit brighter.
An awful lot of comedy writers are a depressive bunch, you know.
Anytime I said something funny, my father would say, "That's a great line, write it down."
And I don't see anything wrong with a book of entertainment also having a certain educational point to it as well.
Writing is a subversive act in a way. Everyone's highly suspicious of it.
Tim Sebastian reveals the people behind the words in Hard Talk, all this week on BBC News 24.
Are you worried about the way the world's weather seems to be changing? Well, I'm Richard Wilson, and right now I'm in Greenland. In the last few months I've also visited Antarctica and the Himalayan glaciers, and I'll be reporting on just exactly what seems to be happening to our weather.
A reporter's special, Saturday at 4:30 on BBC News 24.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News 24 with me, Clarence Mitchell. It's exactly 1:30, the main national news headlines. The Department of Health says the serial murderer Harold Shipman may have killed as many as 265 patients. New precautions against CJD. Disposable instruments will be used for tonsil surgery. More cash for Labour's election campaign. 2 supporters donate £4 million. And doctors criticise the mother who promised her daughter breast implants as a 16th birthday present. Good morning. A government report to be published later today says that the serial murderer Harold Shipman may have killed up to 265 of his patients over a quarter of a century. Last January, the former doctor from Hyde in Manchester was convicted of killing 15 of his patients. The names of more than 250 patients who died in suspicious circumstances have been passed on to the Crown Prosecution Service and could open the way for further trials. Shipman is serving 15 life sentences after being convicted of the murders last February.
Good morning, gentlemen. There's no comment.
Last January, Harold Shipman was convicted of killing 15 of his patients and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was one of Britain's worst mass murderers, but police have always suspected the GP had been responsible for the deaths of many more people. Now, a systematic review of the GP's records suggests that he could have killed at least 250 of his patients. The clinical audit looked at surgery records going back to 1974, comparing the level of deaths in Harold Shipman's practice with the death rates normal for medical practices in the area. The findings, expected to be published later today, confirm the suspicions of those whose relatives died while being treated by Harold Shipman.
Well, a couple of my sisters had suspicions in the early days, but we just put that down to grieving, the natural grieving procedure, looking for someone to blame. Then, of course, it came out that Shipman was being investigated, and everything seemed to fall into place from there.
Despite the new findings showing the number of suspicious deaths among Harold Shipman's patients, it's not likely that any further cases will be brought. Harold Shipman is already serving 15 life sentences. Terry Stiastny, BBC News.
Well, our health correspondent Richard Hannaford told us what was known about the Department of Health report.
My understanding is that a clinical audit has been carried out by Professor Richard Baker from the University of Leicester. And he has looked through the medical records of Harold Shipman, dating back to 1974. And he's looked at those deaths that seem unusual, and he's compared the surrounding events of those deaths with practices in similar circumstances. And he's come to the conclusion that these deaths are also suspicious. I think the relatives will feel very confused by this report. This report will suggest that more people than had been thought were murdered by Harold Shipman. We already know that the police and other investigating authorities believed that he had committed other murders, possibly as many as 192. What this report will do will presumably look at other factors which the public inquiry, which will be set up shortly under the tutelage, under the chairmanship of Dame Janet Smith, it will give that inquiry more evidence and more areas of investigation.
Richard Hannaford. Helen Blackwell's mother died in Harold Shipman's surgery. She has been giving us her reaction to the news that Shipman could have killed up to 265 patients.
No, I'm not surprised at all. I think we've known as a family and as a community, we've known that for a long time, that there's a lot more to come out. You only have to talk to people in Hyde who are themselves involved and haven't brought it to the attention of the authorities because they don't want to take it any further. I know of at least 3 people personally who feel that he had some part in their relative's death, but are just not made that way that they want to bring it any further, that they can't do with the hassle, the officialdom, the upset of taking it any further.
Why do you think people are convinced? Well, why are they so certain now? Is it been because of so many coincidences? What has been, you think nobody will be surprised by this. Why?
I think when the trial first started, when he was first under investigation, people wouldn't have it. People thought he was marvellous, and as we all did, the whole of Hyde just couldn't believe that such a devastating thing could have happened. But as the story unfolded, and certainly people who were involved in the trial, it was just so obvious. Everything that was coming out, it was just so obvious. It was just amazing that he got away with it for as long as he did. The things that were happening, the fact that there was at least 5 people died in his surgery. When my mum died, we didn't realise that there was 4 others that had died there. We just thought it was odd that she died in his surgery, but at least he was on hand. You don't think at the time that there's been another 4 in the same position. Otherwise, obviously, alarm bells would have started ringing then.
How do you think, how are people dealing with all this? We keep hearing more and more and more, and the fact that there could be another, at least 50 more families out there.
I think people who aren't directly involved, and there are very few of those incidentally, are quite punch-drunk with it. I think people who aren't involved just think that we should just get on with our lives, just forget about it now, it's over. Of course, if they were involved, they would feel very differently. You can't just get on with your life. You need to see an end to it.
Helen Blackwell's mother. Senior Labour MPs have been defending the party after it named 2 more donors who'd each given it £2 million. The donors were the Science Minister, Lord Sainsbury, and the retired businessman, Christopher Ondaatje. The chairman of the Parliamentary Labour Party, Clive Soley, said it was quite wrong to suggest that rich men expected something in return.
Christopher Ondaatje's famously deep pockets earned him a thank you from the Queen when he funded a new wing at the National Portrait Gallery. The Tories used to like him too, but no longer. he's joined Labour's gallery of rich and generous friends. And today, the millionaire minister, Lord Sainsbury, declared himself another wealthy benefactor, offering £2 million cheques to Labour. The party denies it's too much in hock to a tiny and rich elite.
The cheques are very welcome cheques, but they're certainly not the majority of our income. We get money from a wide range of support, and that's how it should be. I think that's healthy, and that's the beginning of a democratic party.
Is there any cause for concern in the fact that one of these donors, that you named today at least, Mr. Ondaatje, has dual citizenship with Canada, spent a large part of his life in that country?
Well, he's registered to vote in this country, and that's one of the important rules that we laid down. We've campaigned and fought against foreign donations. He's a British citizen, and we're happy to accept money on that basis.
With Lord Hamlin, the publisher who declared his £2 million donation this week, there are now 3 individuals worth £2 million apiece to Labour this year alone. It's raised issues of principle.
3 people have now given the Labour Party about a third of what they'll probably get for the entire election campaign, and have put themselves in a very powerful position vis-à-vis a government. That can't be all that healthy for democracy.
The Conservative Party always worked that way, and now New Labour, which the Prime Minister tells us is a new political party, I'm not a member of it, but he says that, is following the same pattern. And you see, there is a danger. I mean, somebody giving money might end up in the House of Lords. Somebody might end up as a minister. And you don't know what are the forces really at work.
Campaigning can be costly. Next time there'll be a spending limit for the first time. But these donations will help fund Labour well beyond the next election. The extent to which the system of political funding relies on the generosity of a few rich individuals is now clear. New rules requiring donors and donations to be detailed in full will come into force next month. But there are still questions. Do these gifts undermine the idea of mass participation in the political system? One way or another, the idea of state funding of political parties won't go away. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Hundreds of underperforming schools in England are to receive thousands of pounds in grants to help them attract good teachers and raise standards. One school in Brighton is one of 500 where most pupils fail to get good GCSEs. From this autumn, they'll receive an extra grant to recruit staff and offer bonuses to good teachers. But the teaching unions have criticised the plan, claiming the money won't be going far enough. The government says it's part of a long-term improvement programme.
Our aims long term are quite simply to see every school a good school or an improving school. And I don't think it's too much to ask that by 2006, all our schools, every single secondary school, has at least 25% of their pupils, 1 in 4, achieving 5 A's to C's. Now that's our short or medium term objective. I'm sure we can get there, and the lesson to be learnt is from our primary colleagues who have done exactly that as far as literacy and numeracy is concerned. It can be done. The kids are as bright as kids anywhere else, but sometimes they need extra support, and that extra support costs, and that's why we're giving extra money.
Estelle Morris. Hospitals have been given new instructions to reduce the risk of spreading the human form of BSE, mad cow disease. Surgical instruments used in tonsil operations in England and Wales will now be thrown away rather than sterilised and used again. The Department of Health insists there's only a theoretical risk of contracting variant CJD.
Thousands of surgical instruments in hundreds of hospitals are decontaminated every day. But even state-of-the-art sterilisation machines like this one at London's St Thomas's Hospital can't destroy variant CJD. Patients with the disease have high concentrations of infective agent in their tonsils, and the fear is it could be passed on to others by surgical instruments. The risk is purely theoretical, according to the head of the government's advisory committee on CJD, but they're taking sensible precautions.
Tonsillectomy has been identified as a discrete operation where it is possible to move to disposable kits fairly rapidly, and it will be used, if you like, as a trial to see what the problems are in moving towards disposable instruments, and then other surgical procedures will possibly be considered later.
And this is the rogue agent which causes variant CJD, a prion protein. It's almost impossible to destroy, but the government's spending £200 million on new sterilisation equipment to combat it. A world expert on prions and another government advisor has spent 3 years calling for today's action, but he rejects the official line that the risks are purely theoretical.
I don't think it's fair to call the risk theoretical. I think it's a real risk. The problem is we can't quantify it.
We know that classical CJD, which we've known about for many years, has been inadvertently transmitted by surgical instruments, even following normal hospital sterilisation procedures. So we have to take this seriously, and I'm glad to see the department are introducing these measures.
The big secret which tests like this have yet to unlock is just how many people are walking around the UK incubating this deadly disease. It could be hundreds or tens of thousands. The more who have it, the higher the potential risk from surgical instruments. It could be years before we know the answer. The only way to absolutely guarantee patient safety would be for these new disposable instruments to be used in every type of operation. The cost would beg a belief. Hundreds of millions of pounds every year. And at the moment, the government and its scientific advisors believe the risks are far too small to justify that. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, at St Thomas's Hospital.
Doctors have criticised a mother who's promised her daughter breast implants as a 16th birthday present. Kay Franklin says she doesn't want her daughter Jenna to have hang-ups about her appearance, but the Association of Plastic Surgeons says the girl is too young to have the operation.
Jenna Franklin is a healthy, pretty and intelligent 15-year-old, but she's not entirely happy with the way she looks. Her breasts are too small, she says, and believes she won't be successful in life if that can't be changed.
Today, people, everywhere you see them, they've got big boobs, and it's just a confidence boost, really. There's other people that have had it done. I don't see why I should be different. If you go out and ask other girls around the country, they'll all be agreeing that boobs is what they want.
Clearly a belief supported by Jenna's mother, who has agreed to let her daughter have a breast enlargement operation for her 16th birthday later in the year. Mrs. Franklin, who runs a private cosmetic advisory service with her husband, has had the operation done twice herself and believes anything that boosts her daughter's confidence is a good thing.
She knows the pitfalls. It's not just a glossy, I'm going to have boobs and look at me. But come on, every time we put the television on, how many stars are having it done? So is it not there in front of us?
But the surgeon her mother wants Jenna to see says he thinks she's too young for such an operation.
Breast augmentation is a good operation, it helps a lot of people. But I feel at 16 the breast hasn't matured enough. Also there are a lot of psychological implications, and I think one has to wait until we see what God gives us.
More young people are having plastic surgery than ever before, but many doctors, aware that teenagers often have a problem with their self-image, say a quick-fix solution is not the best answer. And there are fears too over the safety of breast implants. This 15-year-old's desire for cosmetic surgery at such a young age has highlighted fears that there's just too much pressure on girls to be perfect. Emma Howard, BBC News.
This is BBC News 24. Still to come between now and 2, the sport, the weather, and what would you do with the Loch Ness Monster? The government has a plan, should Nessie ever turn up.
Busy week? Don't let the world pass you by. Wake up at the weekend to the power of BBC News 24, bringing you the headlines every 15 minutes. 24 hours a day. Covering more stories, more thoroughly than any other news team. Running regular updates on weather, sport, and business. BBC News 24 brings your world to life at the weekend.
It is exactly 1:45, the headlines. The former GP, Harold Shipman, convicted of murdering 15 of his patients, killed up to 265, according to a government report. Disposable instruments are to be introduced for tonsil surgery to reduce the risk of spreading variant CJD. And the Labour Party has received another boost to its election fighting fund. 2 individual backers have donated £4 million. Sport now. Here's Chris Hollins. Chris.
Hello again. We start with rugby union news, and England skipper Martin Johnson has lost his appeal against the length of a 35-day ban imposed by the RFU for 3 acts of foul play for his club Leicester. Johnson still has to serve the full length of the suspension, but will be available for England's opening Six Nations game with Wales on February the 3rd.
With hindsight, it didn't get the results we wanted, but we thought it was the right thing to do to appeal. So, as I say, it was a fair hearing, conducted properly, and he's going to accept the decision and get on with it.
Football now. The future of Aston Villa's England defender Gareth Southgate is again the subject of speculation, but one deal which has gone through has seen Liverpool complete the signing of the Barcelona striker Jari Litmanen.
Litmanen has spent the past season and a half kicking his heels at Barcelona, where his opportunities have been severely limited. Captain of the national team and a legend in his homeland, the 29-year-old has been voted Finland's Player of the Year for 9 consecutive seasons. With every trick in the book, Litmanen is a player of immense skill and vision, whose favourite position is as an attacking midfielder. A Liverpool fan since he was a boy, Litmanen has described his transfer to Anfield as a dream move, and he should be match fit and ready for first-team action in about a week's time. In Scotland, Dundee have broken their wage barrier and signed their Argentinian striker Claudio Caniggia until 2003. With Dundee's matches being screened live in Argentina, Caniggia believes he can achieve his aim of making it back into the national squad for the next World Cup by staying at Dens Park. A resounding success since joining on a 6-month loan deal earlier this season, Dundee are well aware that helping the player achieve his dream can only be good for the club.
To sign a player like Claudio Caniggia, when Ivano mentioned that, I thought, this is nonsense. But no, Ivano brought him here, and the guy has done a job and worked really hard, and he's a nice guy, and to get him signed on long-term contract is a great coup for the club.
West Ham have renewed their interest in Gareth Southgate. The move for the Aston Villa defender comes after complications in the potential transfer of Rangers captain Lorenzo Amoruso. Unhappy at the £10 million asking fee, West Ham seemed likely to offer just £6 million for the England international. And the FA will have another round of talks with Sven-Goran Eriksson later this month. Moves are continuing to try and include the future England manager in the World Cup qualifier against Finland in March. Adnan Nawaz, BBC News.
Cricket in South Africa have taken a 1-0 lead in the 3-match test series with Sri Lanka by winning the second test in Cape Town. South Africa won by an innings and 229 runs, the Sri Lankans' heaviest ever defeat in test match cricket after they were bowled out for just 180 in their second innings. And that's all the sport for now.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Now, a group of British protesters campaigning against Iraqi sanctions are due to enter the country in the next few hours to deliver medical supplies to those in need. The delegation of 4 will be the largest from Britain to step foot in Iraq with the intention of breaking the embargo. Their mission coincides with the 10th anniversary of the Gulf War. The sanctions were introduced following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Well, on the phone now, live from the Jordanian capital, Amman, is Milan Rai, one of the 4 who are due to set off for Iraq in a couple of hours. Milan, thank you for joining us. This, of course, is not the first time that you've gone into Iraq with medicines. What do you think this will achieve?
Well, the first time I went into Iraq, it was actually not with the medicines I'd set off from, because they'd been confiscated by the British government. And on my return, when I tried to negotiate the release of those medicines so that they could go to sick people in Iraq, I was arrested and threatened with 5 years imprisonment. So all 4 of us who have gone on this delegation have gone on to break the sanctions, defying the government, knowing full well the consequences. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to pose the choice to the government. Do the government really believe in the moral and legal case for the sanctions, in which case they should follow through logically and prosecute us, or can they be persuaded to join the growing international consensus, which is for the immediate and unconditional lifting of the non-military economic sanctions on Iraq? What we hope to achieve is to show some sign of solidarity to the Iraqi people, to show them that they haven't been forgotten by the outside world, and to help build pressure on the British and US governments to change this cruel policy.
But isn't there an argument that says that sanctions are virtually full of holes now anyway? We're seeing civilian flights resuming, we're seeing some medicines going in, some oil being sold. Really, your protest won't have that much impact.
The primary problem for ordinary families in Iraq is a lack of purchasing power. There's unemployment of over 60%. The people who are in employment are earning perhaps a couple of pounds a month. Until the economy can get back on its feet, and that means that the economic sanctions have to end, those families are going to continue to be denied the means to buy fruit and vegetables and to rent accommodation and so on, which they need. So that's a very fundamental need of ordinary people, which is contributing, the denial of which is contributing to the humanitarian crisis. And that has to, can only be changed by the lifting of economic sanctions, the fact that flights are going in and out, and the fact that there is at the moment, quite large oil for food humanitarian dole program doesn't change that fundamental reality for household income.
Milan Rai from Jordan, for now, many thanks. It's been virtually closed for over a fortnight, and one of England's busiest railway stations will remain that way for at least another week. Leeds Station has been open to only a handful of trains because of a multi-million-pound facelift. The work has caused major disruption for passengers and business. Railtrack has already missed 2 deadlines set for the project's completion, and it admits the situation is now unacceptable.
Just after Christmas, the station's modernisation scheme was warmly praised by the Deputy Prime Minister for being on schedule. Now, Railtrack admits the emergency bus connections will continue because of unacceptable and significant problems with the project.
It is a nightmare because I've got to be in work for like 11 o'clock in the morning. I have to be up for 6 just to try and make these buses.
It took me 6 hours to get from London to Bradford, and this is my 4th coach today.
Yet another delay to the £165 million project has compounded the travelling misery for commuters across Yorkshire. And business leaders are warning of serious economic damage.
Railtrack needs to get a grip on their asset management and start delivering on the promises that they've made. Otherwise, this region is going to continue to lose its competitive advantage that we pride ourselves on, our transport infrastructure.
Fundamentally, we try to cram in too much work into too short a time. It's our problem, it's not the operators. They've worked very hard to help get round this problem. We've got a lot more work to do here still.
Tonight, a few trains struggled out of Leeds, but not on the main line to London or Manchester. The people of Leeds enjoy the modern image of their city as a growing, sophisticated northern capital. In fact, it's England's largest legal and financial centre outside London. And that makes this ongoing rail chaos here an even greater embarrassment. John Thorne, BBC News, Leeds City Station.
Now, heading further north from Leeds, what would you do with the Loch Ness Monster if Nessie should ever be caught? Well, it turns out that the government agency Scottish Natural Heritage has a plan for dealing with such an exciting event. The agency says it's really more concerned with protecting the loch from Nessie hunters, but it has to keep an open mind over the possibility that an unusual visitor might one day be snared.
Nessie hunters, or rather cryptozoologists, take themselves very seriously, and so do government agencies. So when this Swede, Jan Sundberg, announced the latest plan to capture the monster with a net, Scottish Natural Heritage thought it had better come up with a plan to prevent otters and other wildlife being killed and to ensure the safety of Nessie herself.
I think that it's actually bureaucracy gone mad. I mean, for many years now, Nessie has been protected by statute. There's the Wildlife and Countryside Act, there's a Vets Act from the 1960s, and quite frankly, that's been more than enough over the last 70 years, so I think it's just a little bit over the top.
A prehistoric single-humped reptile or a log? The latest theories about Nessie range from an unusual whale to a large mutant eel. Either way, if whatever it is happens to be caught, SNH would allow a DNA sample to be taken from its skin, slime or hair before, such as it may be, returns to the murky depths.
It's not really bureaucracy going wild. It's really about just getting people talking to each other and agreeing some criteria, some procedure whereby projects can be evaluated and go ahead with a minimum of impact on the wildlife.
And the point is, you never know.
Well, I'd jump in my car and I'd be down there quick. But obviously, if it turned up with something that was unknown to science, the eyes of the world would be on it, and Scottish Natural Heritage would be there.
And so the product of 10,000 years of evolution can be assured safe passage to Scotland 2001.
Well, from Nessie to something else that's had an absence for a number of years, for nearly 30 years in fact. Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, no less, have returned to our screens. In the 1950s, Bill and Ben were black and white and had visible strings. The new version is in colour and altogether slicker.
Weed.
Very hot out here. Oh, and what a lot of rubbish. It's a good job I do something useful with rubbish.
I can still remember the black and white version. So, will the new colour Bill and Ben catch on with youngsters? Eve Karpf is the new voice of Weed in the new series, and she told BBC News 24 that she thought it would.
Although, Teletubbies, all the other animation series are lovely, but I think this has got something enchanting and very, very charming and very, very sweet that is just timeless. I think it's just beautiful, and I think children also, you've got to remember there's so many parents who are going to encourage their children to watch it and think, oh, there it is, it's back. We want to see it with you.
Now, what adventures were they doing this time?
The adventures are more up to date now, but a lot of things to do with weed as well, like helping weed protect herself from the sun and all sorts of things, perhaps, that they weren't so sun conscious many years ago, but there are all sorts of adventures with all of them.
Return of Ben and Ben. I'll be back with a full bulletin of world news headlines in just a couple of minutes' time at 2, but first, the latest weather with Alex Deacon. Alex.
Hello again. It's a very wet night across the bulk of England and Wales. Due to this area of low pressure, this sort of position we think by around the dawn period. Further north, some clearing skies, mist and fog patches forming, and here temperatures falling away as well. -1 in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, some icy stretches on the roads first thing. Further south though, a good deal milder under all that cloud and that rain, and we will need to watch that rain. Water levels are already high and they'll only be rising. There is the further risk of flooding through the remainder of tonight and also for Friday. So we start the morning, very wet and fairly miserable across the bulk of England and Wales. Heavy and persistent rain, that rain falling as sleet and snow over the Pennines and the Welsh mountains. Further north, that mist and fog may be reluctant to clear in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but here it should be a good deal brighter, some sunshine coming through. Just a few scattered showers, these coming through more, I think, in the afternoon. Further south, that rain should gradually move away, but I think all the time down the eastern side it's going to remain fairly cloudy with outbreaks of rain. The best chance of any brightness in the southwest. Now temperatures, not too bad down here, 9 Celsius. That's 48 in terms of Fahrenheit, but elsewhere a good deal chilly, and particularly down the eastern side where we've got this quite brisk wind, you really will be feeling quite cold. Now race meetings on today. Ludlow and Southwell have survived. Towcester though has been abandoned. And I think, in terms of conditions, definitely Ludlow favoured here. Some sunshine coming through. I think just the risk of a few showers and temperatures up to 7, but Southwell fairly grey and damp, and temperatures only up to 5 with quite a brisk wind. Now for Saturday, low pressure moves away, and Sunday we get a sort of northwesterly mixture of sunshine and showers, but this weather front could bring some rather nasty sleet and snow showers to Scotland, perhaps blizzard conditions on Sunday.
Find this many top names in the film world. Talking Movies, the very latest film news direct from the US.
Join Tom Brooks Saturday 3:30 and 10:30 on BBC News 24.
Israel's Prime Minister warns of a wide-ranging confrontation with Arab neighbours if there's no Palestinian peace deal. A report says the British serial murderer Dr. Harold Shipman may have killed as many as 265 of his patients. Yugoslavia's foreign minister says Slobodan Milosevic may face an international war crimes tribunal after all. And the German foreign minister's violent past has come back to haunt him. Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Clarence Mitchell. The Israeli leader Ehud Barak has warned that the Middle East faces a wide-ranging confrontation between his country and the Arab nations if he can't secure a final peace agreement with the Palestinians. The Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat says he still hopes to reach a peace deal with Israel before President Clinton leaves office in 16 days' time. Mr. Arafat was speaking after he addressed Arab foreign ministers in Egypt on the latest proposals being put forward by the White House.
Returning to his people after yet another effort to enlist support abroad. Yasser Arafat says he's ready to negotiate, but Israel wants him to stop the violence first. Mr. Arafat says he still hopes a deal can be reached before the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, but that's just over 2 weeks away, and the two sides aren't even talking. When negotiations do resume, the painful issue of Palestinian refugees will have to be solved. All over the Middle East, the refugees are waiting. They want the right to return to their homes in what is now Israel. International law, they say, is on their side. But Israel, jealously guarding its Jewish majority, says no.
Insisting of right of return is putting a question mark on the very raison d'etre of Israel. We will never agree to it, no matter who comes to this place.
Jewish settlers don't think Mr. Barak should give the Palestinians anything. They're setting up new outposts. If Mr. Barak decides to sacrifice settlements to reach a deal, some of these people will fight to stop him. But if negotiations fail, the Prime Minister says the results will be disastrous. Opening a new party headquarters in Tel Aviv tonight, he warns supporters of a wide-ranging confrontation if no agreement is reached. Ehud Barak wants a comprehensive agreement, but he doesn't think it can be done in 2 weeks. His foreign minister is more upbeat, talking about a general declaration of principles instead. But Israel and the Palestinians first signed one of those more than 7 years ago. Another one now will be greeted with almost universal skepticism. Paul Adams, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, Ehud Barak was speaking in an exclusive interview with the BBC's correspondent Mark Urban. Mr. Barak also said that he doubted Yasser Arafat was serious about peace.
I cannot penetrate the soul of Arafat. I cannot know in advance whether behind all the masks he is a kind of leader that can reach an agreement, or whether he wants to be the Moses of the Palestinians, staying in front of the river, not crossing it into the promised land. I cannot penetrate, but I can, without making any tangible compromises, to unmask Arafat and to show the reality to my own people and to make the whole region looking in a more mature, maybe more painful and cruel as well, but more mature way on the realities and the need to make decisions in order to avoid a tragedy.
And is that what you think you have achieved since Camp David, unmasking Arafat, as you put it, as someone not interested in peace?
Almost unmasking. Maybe the last will is still there for the next few days when we are talking. And we will know if Arafat will demand a right of return in a permanent agreement, right of return for Palestinians back into Israel in a permanent agreement. It means that he doesn't want peace. Insisting of right of return is putting a question mark on the very raison d'etre of Israel. We will never agree to it, no matter who comes to this place. And the other is my saying that I am not ready to sign a document that conveys the sovereignty over Temple Mount, which is the kind of anchor of our identity, to Palestinian sovereignty. But this statement does not fully exclude sensitive, creative formulas that will keep the situation on the ground as it is. No one really challenge it, but make the formal, symbolic wording sensitive to the needs of both sides.
Ehud Barak. A British government report is expected to say that the mass murderer Dr. Harold Shipman may have killed up to 265 of his patients over a 25-year period. Last January, Dr. Shipman was convicted of killing 15 patients in one of the biggest mass murder trials in British history. But police always suspected he'd murdered many more.
Good morning, gentlemen. There's no comment.
Last January, Harold Shipman was convicted of killing 15 of his patients. He was one of Britain's worst mass murderers. But police have always suspected the former family doctor had been responsible for the deaths of many more people. Now, a systematic review of the doctor's records suggests that he could have killed at least 250 of his patients. The clinical audit looked at surgery records going back to 1974, comparing the level of deaths in Harold Shipman's practice with the death rates normal for medical practices in that area of the north of England. The findings of the British Health Ministry report confirm the suspicions of those whose relatives died while being treated by Harold Shipman.
Well, a couple of my sisters had suspicions in the early days, but we just put that down to grieving, natural grieving procedure, looking for someone to blame. Then of course it came out that Shipman was being investigated, and everything seemed to fall into place from there.
Despite the new findings showing the number of suspicious deaths among Harold Shipman's patients, it's not likely that any further court cases will be brought. Harold Shipman is already serving 15 life sentences in prison. Terry Stiastny, BBC News.
Yugoslav's Foreign Minister Goran Slivanovic has suggested that his country may allow an international prosecution of the former president Slobodan Milosevic for war crimes. He said it would be possible to cooperate with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, as long as any trial took place in Yugoslavia. His comments came in the first meeting between the United States and Serbia's new government.
The optimism is still fresh in Serbia. The new alliance swept into power 12 days ago with a 2/3 majority. It has the strongest mandate to change the country and improve international relations. The revolution which ousted Slobodan Milosevic from power was watched with interest by the rest of the world. Western powers especially saw a chance to rebuild relations. His replacement, Vojislav Koštunica, is no great fan of the West, but already things have begun to improve. The foreign minister's visit to Washington was greeted as proof of that. He spoke of a need to continue building ties.
We hope that we shall continue a very good relation we had, at least the last several months, with the administration that is leaving the office, with the new one that is coming into the office.
His reference to George W. Bush comes amid speculation that his administration might withdraw US peacekeeping troops from the region. Madeleine Albright stressed at the meeting the need for continued support. It's a sentiment no doubt felt deeply by the majority of people in Serbia, hoping that 12 years of international isolation is now at an end. Judith Maloney, BBC News.
The United States has rejected a call from Italy for a moratorium on the use of radioactive depleted uranium in missiles. 6 Italian soldiers who'd served in the Balkans with NATO have since died of leukemia. The Italian government and now the European Union wants an inquiry to find out if they came into contact with the cannon shells fired by American warplanes.
In both Bosnia and Kosovo, NATO warplanes fired thousands of rounds of depleted uranium, a byproduct from the nuclear industry. The rounds pierced through armour with spectacular success. But do they also cause cancer and other serious illnesses? Kevin Rudland certainly thinks so. A former British soldier, he's now suffering from chronic fatigue and bowel problems. What he says is a Balkan equivalent of Gulf War syndrome. Mr. Rudland was an army engineer in Bosnia, where he believes he was exposed to depleted uranium dust particles. Since then, he's lost all his hair. NATO, he says, killed Serbs with depleted uranium, but they may also be causing the deaths of their own troops.
I feel I've been let down by the government, really. It's been devastating on my family. Very upsetting for them. I can't think of what I've put my wife through over the years, and my children. It must be something quite horrendous.
In Italy, so-called Balkan syndrome has caused a media outcry, with claims that 6 of the country's peacekeepers have died of leukemia. Salvatore Carbonaro, said to be the latest victim of depleted uranium after serving in Bosnia. Italy's defence minister went to Bosnia to try and reassure his worried troops there. The depleted uranium scare is now snowballing across Europe. Many countries are screening all their soldiers who served in the Balkans. So far, Britain is not.
With the Allied, the NATO forces, people like Italy and Finland, Belgium, Spain and Portugal, and Turkey, they are going to carry out analyses on the urine of their troops to look for depleted uranium. The British government is not going to do that. It's not done it for the Gulf War veterans yet. It's resisting any attempt to do any sensible and meaningful experiments which would address this question.
The Ministry of Defence said it does not believe depleted uranium has caused any significant health risk to British servicemen and women, either in the Gulf or, more recently, in Bosnia and Kosovo. In fact, one source told me the whole issue of depleted uranium is nothing more than a red herring. Next week, NATO ambassadors are expected to discuss the controversial use of these depleted uranium rounds, but so far the alliance is making no apologies.
It's not an illegal weapon, and it's a very effective weapon. So it was used because it was the right weapon for the right job. But if there had been serious medical concerns, of course, people would have looked at it differently. But it's not illegal, and the medical consensus is it's not a problem.
But Kevin Rutland and his family believe he has paid the price of peacekeeping. They fear he is the first British soldier to go down with Balkan War syndrome, and that he may not be the last. Ben Brown, BBC News.
The German foreign minister is facing calls for his resignation from opposition politicians after the publication of pictures that show him attacking a policeman in the 1970s. The German magazine Stern has published photographs of Joschka Fischer beating and kicking an officer in 1973. The minister, who is now 52, was a well-known militant radical during the 1970s.
High profile on the world stage, encouraging moves towards peace in the Middle East. Germany's Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer with his Israeli counterpart in Berlin. But today's statesman used to be a street fighter. Joschka Fischer has told Stern magazine he used to be a militant. Today he's one of Germany's most popular politicians. But as the 70s student on the left, his far-left activism included squatting, stone throwing and attacking a policeman. Stern's photographs show Joschka Fischer in Frankfurt, all in black and wearing a crash helmet, squaring up to the officer who has a truncheon. Mr. Fischer says he'd been running away from a demonstration which had been broken up violently. Then, for the first time, he confesses, "I went against the police with my bare hands." The photographs show the black-suited militant clearly raising his arm to strike the policeman, who's floored in a scuffle which other demonstrators have joined. 27 years on, the minister has apologized. I realized through a painful inner process, he said, that the policy and illusion I had in the 70s of confrontation, playing games and active violence was a big mistake and has distorted what I once stood for. Joschka Fischer has conquered image problems before, including his days as a hard drinker. But these revelations, coming shortly before he's due to be a character witness in a major trial, are the most serious yet. His allies are unnerved. His political opponents say he's unfit for high office. George Eakin, BBC News.
The former Wimbledon tennis champion Boris Becker has appeared in court in Miami to say why he believes his alimony and child custody hearings should be conducted in private. The German tennis star is divorcing his wife Barbara, who's taken the couple's 2 sons from Germany to Florida.
Boris Becker's divorce battle has only just started, but it's already extremely ugly, and his estranged wife Barbara won the first round by forcing him to appear in court in Miami.
I just said I think Mr. Becker's education will be increasing today.
In court papers filed in Germany, the former Wimbledon champion alleged that his former wife had abducted their 2 children when she flew to their holiday home near Miami Beach. American newspapers want to be able to publish details of the divorce, but Mr. Becker appealed to the court in Miami to impose a secrecy order to protect his family. Since marrying in 1993, the couple have endured a hate campaign from racists who objected to Germany's national sporting hero having a black wife. And in court, Mr. Becker said there had been an upsurge in threats since the marriage broke up.
Even today, as we speak, there are threats against my family.
In a tennis career crowned by 3 Wimbledon titles, Boris Becker amassed a fortune estimated at $120 million. He's reported to have signed a prenuptial agreement which would have limited his wife to a payment of $2.5 million in the event of a divorce. Mr. Becker would like the breakup to be settled by a German court. But if the case is finalized in America, he could be forced to hand over half of his wealth. Malcolm Brabant, BBC News, Miami.
This is BBC News, a reminder of the headlines. Ehud Barak warns of a wide-ranging confrontation between Israel and its Arab neighbours if there's no peace deal with the Palestinians. And the British serial murderer Dr. Harold Shipman may have killed as many as 265 patients. And still to come, the sound of silence at Glastonbury. One of Europe's largest music festivals has been cancelled this year because of gate crashes. More on that soon, but first a look at the day's business news. Here's Richard Quest in New York. Richard.
The morning after and the market a bit of a hangover. Having risen so very sharply after Alan Greenspan cut interest rates, Now it was time for some mature reflection. So it's not surprising that the Nasdaq and the Dow both gave back some of their gains. There was also economic news. Retail sales figures were dismal in December. Sears Roebuck, one of the nation's largest retailers, announced store closures, and General Motors said it would idle numerous factories for an extra week in January. It's not surprising Mr. Greenspan cut interest rates. The markets, though, took a breath. The closing numbers. The Nasdaq Composite down 49, the Dow Jones Industrials down 33. President-elect George W. Bush has been commenting on that interest rate cut and whether or not that makes a tax cut in the new administration less likely. Mr. Bush said that both he and the chairman of the Fed, Alan Greenspan, both knew where they stood on these matters.
I think he understands his role, and I understand my role. And I think he recognized that there are warning clouds on the horizon for our economy, and he took action. And no, I don't think there's any. I don't think he's taking any. I don't think he's making any statement about fiscal policy from the actions he took.
Those comments from the president-elect came as he was meeting some of America's top CEOs, part of a two-day summit, to hear their views on what needs to be done with the US economy. One of those attending the summit was the chairman and CEO of Boeing, Phil Condit. I asked Mr. Condit whether he thought the rate cut was necessary and whether it was enough.
One, it is welcome. Two, it is probably not enough, but a half a point at this point was probably the correct answer. I think most people are expecting that there will be additional cuts in the future.
Phil Condit, he's the head of Boeing. Look at the European bourses. London was up 145. Frankfurt, a bit of a loss there, but Paris, the CAC 40 was up 131. And a postscript, the euro regained its lost ground, having suffered when the interest rate cut happened. Now the euro is back at around 95 US cents. That's the BBC Business News from New York.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Now, in Europe, the crisis over claims of political bias at the state-run television channel in the Czech Republic took a new turn when the man at the centre of the row was taken to hospital. Jerzy Hodač is the newly appointed director of Czech TV, but journalists there claim his appointment was a political one. It's prompted a newsroom strike and sit-in by staff at the channel. The station's foreign news editor, Jerzy Potogík, who is a key member of the Strike Crisis Council, said his journalist colleagues were determined to stay until Hodač is replaced.
We are still resisting. We are still occupying the newsroom, which is the most important place for news broadcasting, and we are still calling our politicians to solve this crisis.
The Parliament is to debate the situation, and the government has put forward proposals for civic appointees to the Board of Governors to try and resolve the issue. Is that the way forward, do you think?
Yeah, but of course there's a plenty of things we would like to change. Some of them we would like to change immediately. Firstly, it's our news broadcasting. As I told you, Mr. Hodač or his team at the moment is still interrupting and censoring our news. And then we would like to ask our parliament to dismiss the council, the Czech Television Council, and to keep a discuss about the new law of Czech television or about the Czech television, and then to bring this law into power.
How long are you and your colleagues prepared to stage the sit-in, to continue your strike?
Well, of course, as long as it will be possible and necessary. It means our living conditions are not very good, but you show to your viewers the pictures from demonstration from yesterday. So, in this demonstration, it was a very important moment for us. We've got a new power to resist and to continue in our strike here. So, in this moment, I can say we are ready to be here for days, maybe weeks.
Jerzy Potogík of Czech TV. Lawyers acting for Chile's former military leader Augusto Pinochet say he will not be submitting to medical tests scheduled to begin this weekend. The tests are designed to establish whether General Pinochet is fit to stand trial for alleged crimes against humanity during his time in power. The general's lawyers are also trying to have the prosecuting judge removed from the case. A fire in San Diego County in California has grown to cover an area of more than 10,000 acres. High winds and dry conditions have led to the rapid spread of the fire. The blaze has destroyed several homes and threatened hundreds of others in the area. 2,000 firefighters have struggled to contain a mere 10% of the fire. Around 15 people have died from cholera in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal region within the last month. It brings the death toll from the waterborne disease to 52 in the last 6 months. There are now fears the disease may spread to other parts of the country.
Medical supplies arrive in KwaZulu-Natal, which is struggling to cope with a cholera epidemic. There are many isolated rural areas within this region which lack the services necessary to deal with such an emergency. Rehydration centres have been set up to help those worst affected. The number of people afflicted by cholera has almost doubled in the last month. According to the latest statistics, there are now almost 12,000 cases, compared to around 7,000 in early December. Cholera causes diarrhea so severe that unless treated, victims can die of shock from loss of fluids. The epidemic is thought to have been spread by migrant workers returning from urban centres like Johannesburg for Christmas and the New Year.
People who don't practice good hygiene after they've used the toilet will then can contaminate food, or in fact their waste can contaminate surface water which other people may drink, and the infection would be spread in that way.
The epidemic has spread despite widespread educational campaigns on hygiene and how to use water safely. It's thought the cholera bacteria can lie dormant in river estuaries for up to 10 years before being triggered into a major outbreak after heavy rains. People swimming, fishing or drinking from contaminated waters become infected, and the disease moves upstream by human contact. The South African government fears the epidemic may now spread beyond KwaZulu-Natal. Health ministers in Gauteng, Free State and Mpumalanga provinces have been told to prepare contingency plans to deal with fresh outbreaks of the disease. Della Matthews, BBC News.
This year's Glastonbury Festival, known as much for its mud baths as its music, has been cancelled because of worries about gate crashes and crowd control. The English event was first staged in the 70s, and it's become the largest of its kind in Europe.
It's Britain's biggest annual pop festival, but last year numbers were out of control. The fences couldn't keep people without tickets from getting in. Police estimate an extra 100,000 gate-crashed the event, and fears about security have forced the organiser to call off this year's festival.
The police felt vulnerable, and they were putting their foot down really firm and saying, look, you've got to sort this numbers problem out. We didn't have the time, really, to do all the things that we have to do in order to satisfy the police and the local authorities that we can control the numbers.
30 years ago, it was a fraction of its present size and struggled to break even. Now it makes millions for charity, even though some years it's more famous for mud than music. But events elsewhere in Europe have shown how badly things can go wrong. 8 people were crushed to death at a festival in Roskilde in Denmark last year. Now organisers have an extra year to think of ways of stopping ticketless fans from turning up, and also to build a bigger and they hope impregnable security fence in order to convince the police that the festival will be safe to hold in 2002. David Silito, BBC News.
The main news again this hour. The Israeli leader Ehud Barak has warned that the Middle East faces a wide-ranging confrontation between his country and the Arab nations if he can't secure a final peace agreement with the Palestinians. Yasser Arafat says that he still hopes to reach a peace deal with Israel. I'm Clarence Mitchell and this is BBC News.
Hello again. Well, Western Scotland has seen its fair share of rain over the last couple of days. On Wednesday, Lucerne on the Isle of Skye was the wettest. Thursday, it was Tiree, 20 millimetres of rain falling in 24 hours, getting on for an inch of rain there. It wasn't all doom and gloom, it was quite mild, particularly in the southern half of the UK. Guernsey was the top temperature, 12 Celsius, 54 in terms of Fahrenheit, and across in Cornwall, Falmouth saw, well, getting on for 7 hours of sunshine. I don't think they're going to see 7 hours of sunshine on Friday. Low pressures in charge. This one moving away into the North Sea, but this one here and this one are set to join forces during the course of the night tonight and into Friday, gradually pushing across the country during the day and then edging up into the North Sea to leave us with a northwesterly flow and a mixture of sunshine and showers as we go towards the weekend. But for tonight and Friday, that rain will be heavy across the southern half of Britain. And really, with the water levels already high, we are looking at the increased risk of further flooding. The low pressure and the rain set to be in this sort of position come around dawn across the bulk of England and Wales. Further north, though, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some clearing skies here, allowing some mist and fog patches to form, and also allowing the temperatures to take a bit of a tumble. As low as -1 Celsius we could see in the glens of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, allowing some icy stretches to form on the roads. Further south, though, a milder night, temperatures, 7 or 8 along the south coast, and with quite a brisk breeze blowing here as well. So we go into Friday morning then. The mist and fog may well linger in parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, but generally I think it'll be a brighter morning here. Some sunshine coming through, just 1 or 2 scattered showers around. But across the bulk of England and Wales, well, it's a gloomy and a wet start to the day. Heavy pulses of rain. The rain turning to sleet and snow over the Pennines and also some of the Welsh mountains. But I think in Wales, during the course of the day, things should start to brighten up. The rain will move away to the east and we'll see some sunshine coming out, but also a scattering of showers and a little bit cooler than we've been used to, 7 Celsius at the very best. Now that rain will be moving east, and I think it'll take its time before it clears away from northeastern parts of England. Really, well, down the northwestern parts we could see some sunshine coming out, but generally it'll be a gloomy day, only a very gradual improvement, and feeling quite chilly here. Temperatures at best 5 Celsius with that strong wind blowing in off the sea. Now really it is down this eastern side it's going to stay, not only northeastern England but southeastern parts of Scotland and also down East Anglia. Through the afternoon it's going to remain gloomy and wet. Further west we could see some brightening skies coming through, as I said, for Wales, but also southwestern parts of England, some sunshine coming out. Temperatures in that southwestern corner, well, we could see 9, perhaps 10 again in the Channel Islands, but well, further north a little bit chillier, 5s or 6s, and we've seen with that brisk wind feeling even colder than that, but not as cold as it was at this day back in 1985. A very chilly spell, -4 Celsius at best in parts of Kent. But looking forward to the weekend then, and that low pressure system moves away, as we've seen, northwesterly, mixture of sunshine and showers for Saturday. The showers mainly focused in the west, some sleet and snow showers continuing down east, the best of any sunshine there in the south, but getting a little bit chillier, and for Sunday that trend continues. More sleet and snow showers, particularly over Scotland, some heavy downpours here, but further east a little bit brighter.
Who's making money? Who's losing money?
Following the trading world around the globe.
World Business Report next on BBC News 24.
An awful lot of comedy writers are a depressive bunch, you know.
Anytime I said something funny, my father would say, "That's a great line, write it down."
And I don't see anything wrong with a book of entertainment also having a certain educational point to it as well.
Writing is a subversive act in a way. Everyone's highly suspicious of it.
Tim Sebastian reveals the people behind the words in Hard Talk, all this week on BBC News 24.
Are you worried about the way the world's weather seems to be changing? Well, I'm Richard Wilson, and right now I'm in Greenland. In the last few months I've also visited Antarctica and the Himalayan glaciers, and I'll be reporting on just exactly what seems to be happening to our weather.
A reporter's special, Saturday at 4:30 on BBC News 24.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News 24 with me, Clarence Mitchell. It's exactly 2:30, the main national and international news stories. A government report being published later this morning suggests that the number of people killed by the former GP Harold Shipman could be at least 250. Shipman was convicted last year of murdering 15 of his patients when he was a doctor at Hyde in Greater Manchester. Relatives of his alleged victims say that they're not surprised by the number being suggested in the new report.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all. I think we've known as a family and as a community, we've known that for a long time, that there's a lot more to come out. You only have to talk to people in Hyde who are themselves involved and haven't brought it to the attention of the authorities because they don't want to take it any further. I know of at least 3 people personally who feel that he had some part in their relative's death, but are just not made that way that they want to bring it any further, that they can't do with the hassle, the officialdom, the upset of taking it any further.
Helen Blackwell. Well, our health correspondent Richard Hannaford says that medical experts have gone through all of Shipman's previous cases looking for suspicious details.
My understanding is that a clinical audit has been carried out by Professor Richard Baker from the University of Leicester, and he has looked through the medical records of Harold Shipman dating back to 1974, and he's looked at those deaths that seem unusual, and he's compared the surrounding events of those deaths with practices in similar circumstances, and he's come to the conclusion that these deaths are also suspicious.
Senior Labour MPs have been defending large individual donations that have been made to their party. In the last week, it's been revealed that the party has received £6 million from 3 donors to help fight the next general election. The latest donors are the Science Minister, Lord Sainsbury, and the former Conservative supporter, Christopher Ondaatje, who've both given £2 million each. Electricity users with prepaid meters are paying higher bills, according to the government spending watchdog. 4 million households across the country use the meters and haven't changed suppliers since the electricity market was opened up to competition 2 years ago. The National Audit Office findings show poorer families with prepaid meters who spend more than 10% of their income on electricity still pay more for their power than those better off. A study compiled by one of Britain's largest police forces shows that 1 in 6 of its officers took extended sick leave in a single year. Officers with the Greater Manchester Police are said to work in one of the country's most potentially dangerous force areas. The report for the Greater Manchester Police Authority revealed that 17% of officers are on long-term sick leave. The force is considering starting its own physiotherapy sessions to combat one of the main causes, back pain. Hundreds of underperforming schools in England are to receive thousands of pounds in grants to help them attract good teachers and raise their standards. This school in Brighton is one of 500 where most pupils fail to get good GCSEs. From this autumn, they'll receive an extra grant to recruit staff and offer bonuses to good teachers. But the teaching unions have criticised the plan, claiming money won't go far enough. The number of children who are overweight has increased dramatically over the last 15 years. That's according to a study by the British Medical Journal. A summer camp was established to provide exercise sessions for children with weight problems, the first of its kind in Britain. But researchers from King's College in London say the number of youngsters with weight problems has risen by more than a third since 1984. The Glastonbury Music Festival has been cancelled this year because of safety fears. Concern has been growing about the event over the last few years because of the number of gate crashes. The organisers say they're determined the festival will be back in 2002, though, when security will have been improved and the police are confident it will be safe. Well, those are the main national and international news stories for now. Just after 2:30, I'll be back at 3 with a full bulletin of world news. But now, here on BBC News 24, it's time for World Business Report.
It's the morning after the night before as shares move around the world, reacting to the New Year's surprise.
The euro's on the rise again. We round up the stocks around the world and check for future shocks.
Bit of a shock, Nasdaq off 49 at the close, the Dow down 33.
It's a market rest. Hello, welcome on board. I'm Patrick O'Connell in London.
I'm Richard Quest in New York. There was an indication of exactly why Alan Greenspan did cut interest rates 24 hours ago. New figures showed a weakening of the economy. Retail sales were down. Sears Roebuck, the second largest US retailer, announced it was closing nearly 10% of its stores and laying off a large number of staff, over 2,500. And General Motors said it's to idle 8 of its factories for a week, thus putting 20,000 employees on the sidelines for 7 days. This, of course, is all indicative of the slowing US economy, the very reason why Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve decided to lower interest rates. Just to raise the closing numbers for you, getting my raises and my lowers in the right order, the Nasdaq Composite finished off 49. The Dow Jones Industrials down 33. Basically, the losses there rather small, and the markets have traded fairly narrowly throughout the session. Patrick, Europe.
Yes, true. This is Europe's reaction to the surprise move. Some of the stocks moving higher include Vodafone in the UK, Alcatel, Nokia. Of course, here's one of the investment decisions. Do Americans use cell phones? Yes. Is Nokia the biggest maker of them? Yes. So the stocks rise at one point by around 12%. The idea being if Americans are not going to rein in their spending as much as feared. All the predictions, of course, will wait for another while, but those are the European market numbers.
We must put some perspective into all of this in our market fest. Bob Hormats, a festive chap indeed, joins us from Vice Chairman at Goldman Sachs. Bob, let's ask you the reaction the day following onto the decision.
People, I think, were impressed that the Fed moved 50 basis points. Some people actually would have liked to have seen this in December, prior to Christmas, would have given the Christmas season a little more festive boost. But the fact that he did it, and he has certainly indicated that we're going to see additional cuts down the road, all that has, A, demonstrated that there is some leadership in Washington, B, that credit conditions are loosening up, C, that we're probably not going to go into recession, although most numbers and most economists didn't think we would anyway, but this improves the chances that we won't. And I think it also gives a generally positive psychology to the market going forward. And some of that money that was on the sidelines has begun to come back, certainly came back yesterday.
All right, Bob, I want to throw a question at you from one of our viewers. Donald Fraser Miles writes to us. He writes to us from Canada. He says, the economy does repeat cycles. Now, that seems to be true. Is Alan Greenspan merely responding to that?
Well, he's responding to what he sees as a strikingly weaker economic outlook than existed 3 or 4 months ago. He's responding to a sharp decline in consumer confidence, sharp decline in durable goods orders, sharp decline in demand for big ticket items, as you've pointed out, GM and others in the auto sector, a lot of inventories, they have to work those inventories off. So the inventory cycle is certainly beginning to be worked down. So there's a cyclicality to it. There's also a negative wealth effect as a result of a lot of people losing money, in part through the dot-coms, but other sharp declines. So that was another negative in terms of consumer confidence.
Bob, hold your fire, because we've also got some more reaction. Andres Jarblad has written from Sweden, pointing out that the biggest gains are often followed by the biggest drops. With me in London for more perspective from around the world, Jeremy Stretch from the, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We want to know why Europe appeared always a bit more sceptical about this. For instance, the euro rising while all this great optimism about the US not headed for recession.
Well, what we've seen, of course, is that the markets have gradually been pricing in the Eurozone's growth cycle, moving past that in the United States. Yes, the Fed move has meant that we're less likely to have a hard landing. I would agree with Bob that I don't think we're going to see a